My name is Jill Coyle, and welcome to another episode of No One Dies from Divorce, where we talk the nitty-gritty aspects of divorce and help each other come through this not only surviving, but thriving. I'm a divorce attorney, and I'm interviewing other experts and people just like you who are going through or have been through a divorce, so you can have the latest and greatest information on all things before, during, and after divorce. Let's dive in. Welcome to another episode of No One Dies from Divorce. I'm so excited for our celebrity edition today because we are calling it What Not to Do in a Divorce, and we're using celebrities to teach us all what really we should not do. And I am so excited for our panel today because I have two other attorneys from my office with me, Luke Shaw and Corttany Brooks. Hi, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Jill, for having us on the show. Looking forward to talking about all this celebrity what not to do.
Yes. What's so fun about us being attorneys is we talk a lot about things that our clients did that are a little bit, facepalm wise, I guess you can say, if you're using an emoji, and we are always kind of talking about and giving tips of what we believe you should not do. And there has been so much stuff in the news about some of these celebrities that I just was like, we've got to do this podcast, because the biggest one that has been blown up is in the last couple weeks in February is this Kim and Kanye debacle. Right, guys?
Yeah, I don't know what they think they're doing to help anyone, including their kids.
Right. One of the things that we say all the time is that you should keep your kids out of the conflict, but keep the kids in the relationship. So you don't keep them from, knowing any information, or, try to shelter them so much that they're not allowed to ask questions. Like, they are a part of it, and so you have to help them through it. But what we don't want is you to shove them right in the middle of this controversy and cause it to where they then are conflicted in the fact that they don't know if they can love the other parent or if they are doing things wrong. And we are seeing these problems like lay out in front of us with Kim and Kanye. And I have to call him Kanye. I know his legal name is now Ye, guys. But it gets a little bit confusing, and sometimes I just can't do it. So let's talk about it. Luke, why don't you kind of catch people up a little bit on the Kim and Kanye situation? We had a podcast, I don't know when we did it, but we laid out the entire Kim and Kanye kind of debacle. Go and listen to it. It's a really good preface for this podcast today, because we're kind of talking about the here and now and catching you up a little bit. But go ahead, Luke.
Yeah, so there's a lot of moving parts here, and I will be the first to say I don't know everything about their personal life and situation.
What's so funny is that we only know what you can know because Google is our best friend. When it comes to this, TMZ tends to have the most information. And of course, we always say don't trust the internet for information, especially when it comes to legal services and legal questions. But for this part, yeah, we're getting our salacious gossip from the internet. So the first thing we want to talk about is what not to do. Let's talk about some examples in the last year with some of these celebrities and saying negative things about the other party on the internet. Corttany, why don't you kind of talk about that? And first of all, from a legal perspective, why is that just bad?
So nearly every single divorce decree, and even if you don't have a divorce decree yet, there's still going to be an order in place that says that you can't be out there disparaging and saying negative things about your ex-spouse or soon-to-be ex-spouse. If you're on the internet talking about them being a bad mother or a bad father, you have to know that someone's going to screenshot that. And then it's going to be brought up in court. And so that's number one, why you really shouldn't say anything. And especially you shouldn't bring the kids into it. I think a shining example of what not to do on the internet, even if the intentions might be, and that's something Luke's going to talk about because I know he has feelings about this TikTok, but Kanye posts on Instagram and it says, since this is my first divorce, I need to know what I should do about my daughter being put on TikTok against my will. And then it's a screenshot of his daughter's TikTok page.
So let's catch the listeners up just a minute. What happened is that Kim has set up a TikTok for her daughter, North, who is how old? 8. Like, I have made a rule with my daughter. She will not have social media until she is 16. So I have already, like, in my mind, red flag. Like, your 8-year-old should not have social media like that. So she set this up. And, of course, just being related to the Kardashians, she has tons of followers already. So
it seems like a revenue stream for her child.
Right. Which, yay for them. They're worth like $1 billion. Like, I don't think that is necessary. But one of the things that Kim's made a comment about was she was doing it because her daughter is creative and artistic, and she wanted to give her an outlet. Luke, do you find that that's a proper way to give an 8-year-old an outlet of her creativity and artistic?
No, and I think this is what Courtney was getting at. I don't find that this is an appropriate way, especially without the agreement of dad to make it so public. The problem is, and this isn't just for them, this goes for anyone, any parent who has the other parent making decisions to put their child in a public space without the agreement of both parents, I think is troubling. And I think the court would find that ultimately to be a bit troubling. Even if the child says, oh yeah, I want to do TikTok because she sees her mom and her aunts and everyone else doing TikTok, she wants to do that. I think it's even more troubling when you have such famous people who are already in the public space allowing their child to get on, because who knows who's seeing this, who knows what people are going to do and say. And this child doesn't have the maturity to understand the gravity of what they're doing.
What I was thinking in my mind, too, is that I don't want my 13-year-old on social media because I don't want her being exposed to the Kardashians. I think the Kardashians are a perfect example of teaching girls that they're not pretty enough, they're not special enough, that they have to look a certain way. I mean, their whole job is to look almost unhuman, which is fine. That's what they've made a lot of money doing. But I don't want my daughter to think that Kim Kardashian is natural in any way. And I wouldn't want my daughter on social media following her as some kind of inspiration or whatnot. I just don't like that. So going back, Courtney, now to your thought of what not to do in a divorce. I mean, Ye's response was even worse. So talk about that.
Yeah, so I mean, they're both the prime examples of what not to do in divorce here. From one parent not discussing this major decision that they're making with the other parent, to Kanye then pulling in the entire world, inviting them to comment on his daughter's TikTok, bringing more attention to it, more publicity to the TikTok itself, and about the other parent's parenting decision to allow the child to make a TikTok. And just going off of something that you said, Jill, I agree with you and I disagree with you. She's 8 years old, and an 8-year-old doesn't have the emotional capacity to understand that the Kardashians are not real, that women aren't real and don't look like that. Now, an older individual, I think you can respect them as business women. I mean, they have made millions and billions of dollars doing what they do. And as a grown woman who doesn't have, the same emotional growing to do as a young child, I do respect that.
Yeah. I mean, I expect the empire that they've built and that they are hustlers, but, I agree to disagree on the fact that, how they got there, and good on them. They capitalized, especially Kim, on a really, really bad situation, which was her sex tape. And she made something amazing out of it. And for the most part, Kim's doing a lot of good. She is doing a lot of good. She's using her celebrity, her money for good, and so I'm proud of them for that. But that's what I was saying is Ye turns around, screenshots the TikTok, and then tweets it, which he has millions of followers around the world. So the other thing that is like what not to do is like he basically asked the world to tell him like legal advice, like what, this is my first divorce, I need to know what I should do about my daughter. That would be like you going to the internet and asking them about, how do I get custody, or world, tell me what my child support should be. Luke, talk a little bit about why going to the internet for legal answers is not probably the best thing you should be doing.
Well, I agree. What he did was he asked for public sourcing of legal advice when that tweet or whatever he posted it on should have just been an email to his attorney. And I have a sneaky suspicion there was a conversation with legal counsel who didn't give him a response that he wanted. And so he made a public spectacle of the issue instead of following legal advice. And it's a problem. And this is again, a common problem with a lot of people in divorce is a lot of times there's not a lot to do. One of the articles cited an attorney, and my guess is it's a California attorney, who said there's nothing really to do or say here. The court can make a decision on who gets to have final say over what happens with these kids, whether or not the parties need to mutually agree or whatever it is, which is common in pretty much all states, is what I would imagine. The court can set guidelines for how people should govern these situations. But this is all a case-by-case basis, where there's certain things in their divorce that are special just to them. Their kids are different from anyone else's kids, given who they are. So to go online or to go to your neighbor or your friend who's been through this before to get legal advice is not particularly helpful.
Right.
Because what happened in their circumstances isn't going to apply to you necessarily. Right. What, my neighbor did in his divorce with his wife is not going to apply to Kim and Kanye or Ye. So it's certainly not helpful. And I don't think I think he's smart enough to know that his statement wasn't really a request for response or legal advice. It was to put her on blast.
Right.
That was the intent. And I don't know how anyone could think other than that.
Especially because he's made comments in the past on social media about her. He's put comments or quotes in songs that are specifically negative and against her. He put in a song that, the nannies take care of our children, or and so we know from his past that's exactly what I believe too, that this was him knowing exactly what he was doing, attempting to come back and look like he's almost the victim. I mean, that's like the pure definition of gaslighting, right, Corttany?
Oh, absolutely. And in that same article, actually, where I was reading about this tweet, there's photographs of Kanye having his daughter on stage with him at certain events. And so if it were really truly just about protecting her privacy, he probably also wouldn't be bringing his daughter on stage with him at events, concerts, etc.
Right. And Kardashian's response was, Kanye's constant attacks on me in interviews and on social media is actually more hurtful than any TikTok North might create, she wrote. As a parent who is a main provider and caregiver for our children, I'm doing my best to protect our daughter, while she's also allowing her to express her creativity in the medium that she wishes with adult supervision, because it brings her happiness. Corttany, what were your thoughts to that response and how Kim's trying to handle this?
I still would peg this as a what not to do in divorce. frequently have to remind clients who maybe do have more physical custody of their children that there's just a difference between physical custody and legal custody, and that you still need to discuss and consult with that other parent before you make these major decisions. I feel like I've actually heard this exact comment. I'm the main care provider. I'm the one that's always there, so I should decide. And that's just not what the courts do.
Yeah.
When you have two parents, you have to talk and you have to make these big decisions together. Or like Luke said, one of you is a portion final say.
Right. And maybe we can say allowing your kid to have a TikTok is not considered a major decision. Mm-hmm. But what should have been the process, Luke, that they should have gone through to do this appropriately, or our listeners should be doing when they're trying to co-parent with the other parents?
Well, obviously the best practice is them to talk about it. I think if North wanted to have this TikTok, or if she wanted an avenue to express herself creatively, that desire should have been expressed to the other parent, and then had a discussion about how they could resolve that for North. And quite frankly, I think that there's other alternatives to just creating a TikTok account where it's public and anyone who wants to follow can follow, because that's what leads me to believe it's really more of a revenue generator than it is just a way for her to express herself creatively. Because there are other ways. She could have created an account that's not public, or created videos essentially the same as a TikTok and distributed them in a less public forum.
Right.
They could have created a private Instagram account, and they could have done Instagram shorts that she shares with her friends.
Yeah.
That's not public. Like, there's other ways that they could have done this. Kim saying, oh, well, I'm the primary provider and I know what North wants and I know what makes her happy, so I'm going to do what she wants because it makes her happy. Well, guess what? The 8-year-old doesn't know.
Right.
And if she's just going to support what North wants, that's not being a parent.
Right.
That's simply doing what your child wants to do and hiding behind what they're saying they want.
Right.
That's not okay. And that's not a reason to not respect the other parent's viewpoint or concerns as to what they're doing. And I think that this needs to more and more, what happens with social media with children, I think it needs to become more of a major decision than it may have been in the past, because I do agree with you that there's some pretty significant emotional and psychological effects on children from these applications that needs to be adjudicated more significantly and seriously than what has been done in the past. And I think that as long as a parent gets to do whatever they want in this forum, that's a pretty significant factor for a child. And I think it needs to be taken more seriously than it has been.
I agree with that, because like it is prevalent. I mean, my kid, my 6-year-old, almost 7-year-old, wants to be a gamer. I mean, that is his like goal and dream when he grows up. And he talks about being able to drive a Lamborghini or a Maserati. And it's because he watches, Mr. Beast, and he watches Preston on YouTube, and he's like, I want to be like them. This is a new thing now where kids are like, well, that's what I want to do. So social media is there, but it is just as dangerous as it could be very, very beneficial. And if parents aren't taking that serious, kids are getting hurt and bullied, and really their development, it's been shown, is being delayed by social media. I mean, it can be, I think, more harm than good. And that's why I've told my daughter she can't have social media until she's 16. She has Marco Polo that I control that she can do with her cousins or her friends. That gives her an ability to do like videos and stuff. But other than that, like, I don't need her, having an outlet where people can be mean, because we all know social media is not exactly what it is. We don't see real life on social media. I've really tried to step back on my social media and make a change, and you get me in all my life. Like you get me with no makeup on and sweatshirts, and you get me when I, am at my most vulnerable and sick. I try really hard to be as authentic as I can on social media. And some people don't love that because they're like, I don't want to see the negative parts of that. But I want to be that change to show that I am what I am on my social media, because most people, unfortunately, are just not there yet. So I agree with you, Luke. I think it does need to be more of a major decision. And what I wanted to ask you, Courtney, is we've clearly seen through Kim and Kanye where Kanye is making these outward, just like blasting things that are clearly wrong and not appropriate. But Kim is doing things inappropriately as well. And I think, talk about like the birthday party and that whole debacle. And so we have to be very clear. This is not all on Ye. This is two parents that are completely broken down on co-parenting. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and so not long after we have the issues about the TikTok, we see another Instagram post. So Kim says, as the kid's main care provider, Kanye posts on Instagram in response, "What do you mean by main provider? America saw you try to kidnap my daughter on her birthday by not providing the address." First of all, we've already talked about this. Don't blast your ex on social media. Again, it's almost like he's again seeking legal advice from the masses. But at the same time, if Kim really didn't tell him where their child's birthday party is, that's also a major do not in divorce. It's one of those, this strikes me as one of those cases where we have a parent kind of just trying to exclude the other parent as much as humanly possible. And we know that puts children in loyalty binds. What was that little girl thinking? Did my dad not want to come to my birthday? Why didn't my dad come to my birthday? I mean, it sounded like from social media, he eventually made it to the birthday party.
Because his brother-in-law was the one who ended up texting him and said, "This is where the birthday party is," which again puts family and people in like the worst positions.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I think it puts kids in a loyalty bind. It puts them asking questions that they just shouldn't have to ask. Even if you don't like your ex, you don't need to be hiding this type of information from them.
So let's talk a little bit. Let's use these two very, very broken co-parents as an example. We see this all the time, right, Luke and Courtney, because we're a high litigation firm, where we get two parents that just don't get along. They don't like each other. They don't trust each other. Very, very similar to Kim and Ye. They, they just speak ill about each other. And there is this pull and play with the kids. And of course, they don't have as much money, and they don't have as much help, and they don't have as much fame as the Kardashians and Ye, but we give them all the same advice. So let's start with you, Luke. What's the top advice you give those parents of what they need to do to say, you know what, it's time to put bygones to be bygones, right? And let's move forward.
It sounds like they really need some co-parenting therapy, or someone to help them both come to terms with how they want to parent, because I think they've got fundamental differences on what they want for their kids.
Right.
Well, and actually, that might not be true, depending on, the representation from Courtney that, he takes his kids to his shows and takes them on stage. Like, so if maybe they're not as far apart as, I might think, because if they need to come to terms on what is acceptable and not acceptable for their kids. And if they need a professional to help them figure that out, then maybe that's what they need to do. But they need to stop addressing anything with their kids in the media. This needs to be between them. One of the reports said that Kris Jenner was the only one that has a relationship with him anymore. And if they need to have someone be the go-between, it probably shouldn't be Kris Jenner, but they probably need to have someone who has a positive relationship or rapport with both of them to help them figure things out or help facilitate a more appropriate communication. They have the funds and the ability to afford that. A lot of families don't have that ability to
You know,
have someone facilitate that communication, more effective communication. But their kids are not a weapon, and I don't know them well enough to determine whether or not they're both being sincere or insincere, or where the problem lies in this uh, in these problems. But if they both say, "Oh well, what I care about is these kids," well, then we need to figure out what we can do to help the kids instead of helping ourselves, because everything they're doing in the public forum is for themselves. It's
right,
not for the kids.
right. That actually surprises me about him having a relationship with Kris Jenner, because I'm pretty sure it was a few months ago when he like blasted her and said she's the puppeteer of the family and she controls everything. And he was so sick of her control or something like that. But I absolutely agree. And co-parenting therapy is actually very prevalent. There's classes you can take, high conflict co-parenting classes, to teach you to communicate better, to teach you about the importance of what it means to be a co-parent. Because I always say this, you can be a really crappy husband, a really crappy wife, but a really good mother and a really good father. And the divorce gets rid of the crappy wife and gets rid of the crappy husband. Like, you don't have to deal with that anymore. But you have to separate that out and your feelings out from being able to recognize that that person is always going to be the father of your children or the mother of your children. And you all, whatever relationship you have after the divorce, it is always, you're always going to have it. You know, we get a lot of people that like Kim who's saying, well, I'm the primary caretaker. She still has to co-parent with Ye. Like, it doesn't matter if you have full custody, unless your kids are your rights are terminated, which happens in like less than 1% of all cases. You will always have that relationship with both parents, and the parents are going to have to co-parent on some level. So I really like that. Courtney, what would be some advice you give our clients?
Yeah, so in addition to what Luke said, I mean, these are two individuals who have enough money that they could pay someone to be that go-between. They could pay a therapist to literally communicate back and forth for them. For people who maybe necessarily can't afford that, like you said, Jill, there's classes they can take. There's online applications that you can use to communicate. They even have tone indicators. They won't send a message if it's inappropriate or derogatory or includes any curse words or anything like that. And a major thing that I think is really important to remind clients is that this isn't just until your kids are 18. You are going to be a co-parent. You are going to be a co-grandparent with this person. Your kids are going to get married. They're going to have kids. There's going to be graduations and weddings and all kinds of events where you two, and I do say this sometimes, you two need to buck up and get over it and be civil for your children.
Right.
Which is really hard in some cases, but sometimes people do need a little bit of that tough love. We have to give them the resources to get there. And I would just like to add the caveat that a lot of this advice is absent abuse. If there's abuse in a relationship, a lot of this advice that we're talking about isn't as it's just not going to be as helpful.
Right.
And it's going to be a lot harder to buck up and be civil. And you probably more likely do need an intermediary in those situations. But someone like Kim and Kanye, they can afford it. They could have someone there to help. They shouldn't be using the internet to have these conversations. And people need to remember that this is the rest of your life. This isn't until a kid's 18. Because your kids are going to grow up, they're going to get married, they're going to have kids, and you're still going to have a relationship with this person. It's just going to be a very different relationship.
Right, right. And I mean, we know that they both have attorneys, very, very highfalutin attorneys that they're probably paying millions. We know that they both hired PR firms to work with the attorneys. So listen to their advice. I mean, another example, throwing out another celebrity, because we're kind of going hard on Kim and Ye, is me and Luke did a podcast a few months ago about Kelly Clarkson and Brandon Blackstock. And, you know, we talked all about that divorce and how it was very, very nasty. And it's been, you know, going back and forth. But this goes to another example of what not to do on the internet, because Kelly has now publicly stated that she is not going to give Brandon $1 more than the court will order her to pay. Like, she will not give him any more money. And so the problem with that is on the internet forever. And Kelly Clarkson is always going to make more money than Brandon Blackstock, especially because he now his dream is to be a rancher, right, Luke?
That's what he claims. I don't know what he's going to do without a ranch.
He can't. Yeah, he did not get Kelly Clarkston's ranch. In fact, he could stay there during the pendency of the divorce, but he has to pay all the fees to it, which was like $20 million, which is pretty much a lot of money. Maybe it was more than that.
Well, I think she gave him like 15% of the ranch.
It was
I don't know. She might have done that.
It was 5.12%. I do know that. It was like it ended up being like 900,000 of the 27 million ranch or whatever.
And she might have done that simply to incentivize him to want to sell it to get the money. Yeah. I don't know, but considering she pays him like $600,000 a month in child support and spousal support, it doesn't seem like enough to coerce him to settle.
She pays him $150,000 right now in spousal support, but remember that's going to end. He only got it for a year, and then she $45,000 in child support. But I'm looking at our notes. It's $81,000 for that ranch, which he's paying right now. So he is making about $200,000 from her a month, but almost half of it is going just to maintain the ranch that is not his. I mean, it's just asinine to me. If I was him, I would be saving all that money so that I had a little bit. But one of the things I just wanted to say about that was that she came out and she's like, I'm not giving him $1 more. The problem with that is her kids are going to read the internet eventually, and their dad is never going to be as rich as Kelly Clarkson. It's just not going to happen. And so, it's always, sensitive if your kids are going from a very wealthy parent to not as wealthy. And so, which is why alimony is a shift of income to help kind of equalize that a little bit. But for this, anyways, it's just another example of her just saying something that is hurtful. I think that it could be taken wrong when our kids get older, thinking that mom just didn't want to help dad out. And obviously we just don't want that.
Well, and it's not only that, but other people will bring this to their attention. Other people will ask them questions about it.
Right.
And ultimately they're going to have to make their own assessment of which parent was lying or not lying, or it's just a bad situation entirely. I would say that the Pitt Jolie kids are probably a good example of that. Like, so much has been in the news about both of them, and their kids are old enough to see it all.
Yeah.
And ultimately it makes their kids pick one parent over the other.
Yep. And Courtney and
I think he got 50-50 eventually.
Which she's appealing.
Which is amazing. Like, his attorneys are amazing, considering all of the allegations that were made. Good for him for continuing to fight. Granted, he has the ability to do so, but he's got a lot of damage control to do with his kids, and what those allegations have harmed the relationships with his kids that he's going to have to try and repair.
Yeah.
And that's hard.
Yeah. And that's exactly, me and Courtney did that podcast. Go check that out if you want the whole story on Brad and Angelina, because we know that those allegations, I mean, he went months without having overnights with his kids. He only had therapeutic visits. The investigation came back and didn't find any abuse. And it was years of him getting minimal time. We laugh about that divorce because it started in 2016 when the original allegations came out, and he just went through his custody hearing and got that more equal parent time. I believe it was last year, right, Courtney?
I'm looking right now. I believe it was in August of 2021. I don't believe he got a full equal parent time schedule, but he certainly got more parent time
Yeah.
than
He
he was
got
having.
joint custody, I think is what they said. And we don't necessarily know if the joint custody means equal time. Their divorce was hard to get information because they've sealed the documents. And so that was hard. But again, when we're going through these, using celebrities as, ways of trying to teach us what not to do in divorce, I just think that it's your divorce is probably not going to be on this grand scale, and you probably don't have millions of followers on Instagram, and that's okay. But it still is out there. Like even if you have 100 followers on Instagram, if you post something that is against your spouse, those 100 people are seeing it and they are in your circle of influence. And so it is there to seep in and creep in to your kids. And the one thing we know is the behavior we can control is our own. We can't control the behavior of the other person, and we definitely cannot control the behavior of our circle. So if you're trying to protect your kids, but you're talking about all these bad things to your inner circle, how is it not going to seep back and come back to your kids? It's just going to do them harm. And Kim and Ye is just a perfect example of these poor kids and they are so young. They're so young. And who knows if Ye was super active in their, being raised before the split. I mean, we know Psalm was born right after they then decided to split. So he's so young, but, North being 8 years old, she's seeing it all, and just like Courtney said, at the end of the day, even if, you don't like the father of your children, he is the father of your children. And she deserves to have a dad. And she deserves the ability to love both parents equally. So with that, Luke, final thoughts?
I think that these people need to really think about what's going to be in the best interest of their kids long term, and not what's best for them immediately. And the more that they can work together with their, even though it's heated in the moment, they're making decisions based on hurt feelings in the moment and frustrations they have with each other and letting it bleed into their kids. And they've got to be able to find a way to stop that.
Yeah.
And it's not just them. It's everyone else, every client that comes into our office, and maybe not on this scale. But it happens with extended family all the time, and with friends, and with people in the community, and that just can't happen. And the kids need to stay out of it. Mom and dad need to be parents first and foremost, and that's just it. Their kids need to be insulated as much as possible, so that they don't get caught up in disagreements just for mom and dad and their hurt feelings. They need to be able to be kids, regardless of what happens with mom and dad. And mom and dad need to help the kids understand that the other parent is a good parent or a good mom and dad. And unless, I guess, with Courtney already said it, if there's an abuse involved, that's a different story. But in most cases where mom and dad are good and they want to be good and they want to take care of their kids, they want what's best for their kids, mom and dad need to find a better way to resolve conflicts or disagreements as to what's going to happen with the kids, and make sure that they're not pitting the kids against one another. Or like, for example, the TikTok thing, mom says, well, you can't have TikTok anymore because dad said you can't.
Right.
That kind of behavior just shouldn't happen. That's why the discussion between mom and dad should have been resolved prior to any decision for the kid. And, Kim probably should have said, hey, North, I really appreciate that you want to do that. Let me talk to your dad about that and see what we can do.
Yep.
That would have been a more productive way to resolve this issue, rather than just doing what I want and then creating a bigger conflict. So ultimately, they need to think long term, and they need to think about their kids before their own pride.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Courtney?
I think Luke really just said it perfectly. The only thing that I would add to that is talk to your attorney. We go through this, and this is what we do. This is what we deal with every day. So talk to your attorney, listen to your attorney. They're going to tell you the things that are, the do's and don'ts. And then it's on you to make those decisions that are going to be best for your kids.
Yeah.
I do want to add one thing real quick. What Courtney said, it kind of prompted this, but when you're talking to your attorney, what is legal and what is right is not necessarily the same thing.
Right.
So, while Kim and Kanye may not have broken any orders because they weren't ordered not to, doesn't necessarily mean it was an appropriate thing to do.
Yeah.
And the law doesn't account for every situation, and it can't account for every circumstance that might affect your kids and your co-parenting relationship. So that this goes well beyond a legal issue and more of an emotional and a therapeutic situation where you've got to understand the nuances and the effects of behavior outside of the courtroom.
Yeah.
And that's important to listen to, not just your attorney, but other people who know your kids and can help you make good decisions for your kids.
Absolutely. Kim and Ye need to read my book. No One Dies from Divorce, How to Survive and Thrive When Your Marriage Ends, has so many tips and advice for you on how to deal with co-parenting issues and also what not to do in divorce, and other advice on what you need to do to become emotionally whole so that you can deal with these issues and be. One of the biggest things with divorce is we're angry and we're emotional, and we then make decisions off of emotion. And just like Luke and Courtney said, it ends up being decisions that are not in the best interest of either you or your children. So the best thing you can do right now is be working on getting mentally strong yourself, so you stop making decisions off of emotion and you start making decisions based off of what's right, what's legal, and you know that they're the best decisions for you. Obviously, your attorney can help you through that. I know divorce is super hard. I know it's emotional. And, when you're Kim and Ye and you have billions of people watching you every day, it's just kind of their go-to outlet to do some of this stuff. But at the end, it's only hurting their kids. So stop, think, and ask the question, am I doing this because I'm emotional, or I'm doing this because I think this is best for my children? And if you can answer that question, I promise you, this will get better. And you'll be able to make those decisions that are best for you and best for your children. So follow us. Please go to jillcoil.com where you can find all of my information. You get more blogs on this. Follow me on my Instagram, Jill Coil. No One Dies from Divorce, guys. Thank you so much to my guests, Luke, Courtney. You guys are amazing.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Till next time. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed, please subscribe, follow, and share. I'd love to hear your questions and feedback. You can contact me at community@jillcoil.com. See you next time. I am an attorney, but I am not your attorney. Any advice given on the podcast is general and shall not be construed as legal advice.